Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Welcome to Defend Your Castle. Thanks for joining us today. Happy to have you. My name is Matt Sherman, and we're with CRM Science. I'm a Salesforce consultant and developer. I have 6 certifications, and this is my teammate, Jared.
Hi, everyone. Jared Snyder. I am a Salesforce developer, also CRM Science. Find us with the white lab coats. And I am going to be, by the end of this demo, I'm going to be the bad guy that's going to be showing you all the bad stuff that can happen from a development perspective as far as attackers invading your castle.
OK. So today, we're this guy, and this castle is our community. And we're going to be defending it and protecting yourself and your users so that they have a good experience and their personal and confidential data is protected in your community. You're going to be answering to your executives so that any hard-hitting question or concerns they have about the company or brand is protected with your community. And like Jared said, he's going to show you some demos on how to prevent attackers from coming after your community in Salesforce.
All right, so as you're implementing a community or you're doing upkeep on your community, by the end of this presentation, we also want you to walk away with a type of checklist of things that you need to consider from a security perspective. So first, need to think about who exactly the audience is. Is it going to be a public community? Is it going to be internal? Is it going to be segmented by certain groups of customers for your community? Second, what type of technologies are you going to use? Is this a new Lightning community? Is it going to be Visualforce pages? What type of Apex code is going to be firing in the background? And how much declarative programming versus getting in and getting dirty with code are you going to do as you're building out your community? And then thirdly, engagement. How are you going to interact with the people that are using your community? Are you going to use Chatter? Are you going to build a custom solution? Are you going to use an App Exchange app? Are you going to engage with your communities at all? Is it just going to be where your customers can go and get information? And then Matt mentioned executives. Executives loves to see engagement and how many and adoption of your community. So is it being used? What type of information is being hit? Why are people going to this community? And you're going to need a way to report on that and give it back, get some metrics. And then last but not least, security. It's why we're here. How are we going to make sure that the castle doors are locked when they're supposed to, and only the correct people are going to be able to see what is meant to be displayed? And we got some demos at the end, and that's pretty much it. So that's the checklist.
Cool. So jumping into it, we have got a few tips before we get into the demos. If you have a community and you're implementing it, if you have a Chatter enabled in your community, it's a collaboration tool. We all know that, but there's some risks. And what we're talking about today is phishing risks, bad links, on top of profane and ugly language like that. And if you're worried about that in an external community, you can enable flagging so that your community can kind of moderate itself. And flag posts will be sent to your assigned community moderators, and they can block, remove harmful content and users from the community and kick them out. So very similar to other forums we've all seen on the web. And you're responsible for your community. So if someone comes to you and asks you a question about why has this user logged in 100 times this last day, or how often are our pages being hit on the community, you need to be able to answer that. And event monitoring might be the solution for it. So it's a feature that Salesforce offers, and it tracks logins, logouts, API calls, a few other events that will be sent to you in a log that you can analyze and be able to answer those questions and also review suspicious behavior in your community. We all probably know about field history tracking, but there's also field audit trail, and it allows you to track field changes, the user who made the change, and the date for up to 10 years. So it could be important for regulatory or compliance standards. And then I just think you should create some user login reports to track the adoption and engagement of the community, see who's logged in and see who hasn't logged in as well. The first step to your community, the first line of defense will be your org-wide defaults, your sharing settings. So these are the castle walls. And you'll want to set up, most likely, an external sharing model. So we've got the public, private, internally, but you can also have the same type of model externally. So just enable it, and you can make accounts private, users private, contacts private, lock it down externally, and then open it back up with sharing rules and sharing sets. One thing that I'll show you here is the user-to-user visibility. So by default, when you activate your community, all users in your community can see all other users in your community. So that might be great if you have chatter and you want a lot of collaboration, but it also might be a little bit too open for some companies, and you don't want everyone seeing everyone else. Could just be a data issue if your confidential users are able to see other users. So let's flip to. I'm going to get into our demos here. So those are just a couple quick tips. What we have here, we're all familiar with it. A black screen.
How do we present this?
What I'm trying to show is the sharing model. So everyone knows the org-wide defaults and enabling the external sharing model. So externally, we'll have the accounts, contacts, there we go. Accounts, contacts, and users set to private. We're going to lock it down, okay? And logged in here, today we're Jack Rogers, Captain Jack. And I just have a quick Visualforce page here, tab in the community that displays the accounts, contacts, and users that he can see. So we saw a black screen, but what we should have seen was that the user object was private. But here you can see that I can not only see Patty Peer, our friend in our own company, but I can see 6 other users. And so that might be a concern. It might be too open, like I said, for all users in a community to see all other users in a community. And it's the simplest fix. It's just something to be aware of. Is as we scroll down here, see our user object is private in the external sharing model. But here, community user visibility, by default, will be checked. And this is just saying that everyone can see everyone. So if you don't want that, you'd rather it pay attention to your sharing model instead of that default setting. Simply save it, and when we go back in here to the community, refresh, we'll see that it respects that. Okay, so now our sharing model is kind of overriding that default setting. For that first line of defense, your org-wide defaults, is not the last one, and it can be those walls can come crumbling down really quickly, which I'll show you. So this is our Visualforce page. This is the controller behind the scenes. And it's simply going to query for accounts, contacts, and users. And you see it's public with sharing. So that means that it is respecting Jack Rogers' sharing settings. It's respecting the field level security, the org-wide defaults, the record access that user has. If this was changed to without sharing, and there's reasons to do this, there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but if the code was written this way, without sharing, it's going to bypass your org-wide defaults. And when you go back into the community, we look at this again from Jack's perspective, all the accounts, contacts, and users have now been exposed to that end user. Obviously a huge security concern, and something that you need to take into account, that despite your best efforts on the declarative side of the sharing model, the code needs to be properly written and maintained as well.
Oh, thank you, Matt. So we're going to switch back to our slides here, see if it works. And we're going to go here. So what else might we need to think of from a security concern? So out of the box, Salesforce provides a couple of options that give you a type of report card on how secure your org is from a configuration standpoint. So security health check, you'll find that under setup, quick find, health check. It's going to give you a report card, and it's going to rate things like your login policies, your timeouts, your password complexities, and any callouts that are allowed. It's going to rate you as, green is good, yellow is warning. You might want to go look at this, and red is you definitely need to, take a consideration and lock something down. The next type of protection you can also use is the Shield platform encryption. So if you're in an industry that requires your data to be encrypted at rest, not just during transmission, you can reach out to your AE. It is an additional license, but there is the option to encrypt your data at rest. There's some configuration that needs to go along with it, and there are some considerations if you're displaying an encrypted field on a Visualforce page or within a Lightning component that you may also need to look at. And then lastly, my favorite, because I'm a developer, is the Apex coding guidelines, the vast library provided by Salesforce that gives you kind of the do's and don'ts and best tips of, if you have that question of how can I, and then you go to Uncle Google and finish out that sentence, you're probably going to get a link to one of the docs within the top 3 searches, and I'd say 8 times out of 10, it's going to, solve the answer. It's going to give you the answer that you need. So what are some things that are out there in the World Wide Web that you need to be considerate of? One type of an attack is called Sokolow Injection. I've been a database programmer for a while, and we have a language called SQL or Squeal or SQL, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, it's a query language that lets you get data out of a database. Well, Sokolow's really no different. It allows you to query your Salesforce objects and return your fields, and you write a structured query, and Matt showed you the example in his page controller that he queried the contacts and the users and the accounts. So with Sokolow Injection is with our demo, again, okay, it worked, perfect. We have a page, and we're going to be searching the members of our castle by title. And I'm just going to put in a string here, and I'm going to search for all the knights. And I'm going to perform the search, and sure enough, all I get is knights. So the query worked as intended. But like I said, I'm a curious developer. I want to see if this site is vulnerable. So I'm going to write something like this. May not make sense to human eyes, but once this is passed to the query that gets executed, it's going to make sense. But we don't want it to make sense. So now, as we can see, we have changed the where predicates of our query, because we're not only searching by title, we also added this or name where predicate. So we've extended the query, and now we're displaying things that might not have been originally intended by the developer that wrote it. So here's the example of how, here's the bad example of why we were able to see that. That's just a macro that I pre-programmed to write all that out because I got fat fingers and I don't want to mess it up as I'm typing it for you guys. But what we're doing is we're taking a string and we're just concatenating pieces together. And the big difference between this and then the solution I'm going to show you is that at runtime, this method doesn't know what the query is. So it's just taking a string and it's going to execute that query as, as it was concatenated together. That's why we were able to change the where predicate and add that or condition in there. In the good example, we're not concatenating anymore, but we're using what's known as variable binding. And here, if the screen cooperated, here is how you do that. So now, as this class is saved, the query and the engine knows exactly what the structure of the query is maintained. And we're only going to input that string literally in the like condition in here. We're not going to be able to add, we're not going to be able to chain commands together, and we're only going to consider that unless we have a title, someone in our org with a title of % or name like %, then we're not going to get any results. And to show that, we're going to put that same string in, and this is a page that's running off of that class, and as you can see, we don't get any results. The binding worked. Along the same vein of Sokolow Injection is called cross-site scripting, where we're not going to be inserting into a query, but we have a script tag on our page, and we're going to actually be injecting some JavaScript into the page that once you get into the realm of JavaScript, you're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. So we're going to do something fun. We're going to see if we're going to be able to do it. And what I'm doing is I'm going to try and insert an image tag that's going to fail, and then I'm going to use the onError method to Let's see what happens. Maybe redirect us to somewhere else. Uh-oh. Now we're in Jurassic Park. No more in a castle. Continuity of the presentation is over. Well, if we were able to do this, if you expand your mind a little bit, we can also do some pretty nasty stuff with JavaScript. And maybe your data is flying out of your org and you're not able to track it anymore. So this one might be a bit bigger of a concern than the Sokolow Injection demo. So I'm going to show you how to solve that. So this is the page of where it's bad. And you can see we are in a script tag. And once you go into a script tag, Salesforce says, hey, you're not going to use the platform. You're going to write your own script. You are responsible for everything that goes on inside of there. So we have this is the bad example. And all we're doing is we're setting the inner HTML of that div container with just the straight, whatever that output text from that text box was, we're just going to plop it in there, and it's going to execute. And the page, once you get to the HTML rendering of it, is going to say, oh, I'm coming across some JavaScript. Boom, let's execute it, because it's not encoded correctly. So the answer on how to fix this within the script tag is, oops, not that one. Sorry. Forgot the good. Is when you're in a script tag, Salesforce provides certain methods like this JS in HTML encode. So it's JavaScript in HTML encoding. So it's going to respect and it's going to treat your caret brackets, your opening and end tags for HTML, and it's also going to respect the single quote mark in JavaScript, and it's going to treat them as literal characters and not executable portions of code. So we had to do this because we were within the script tag, but if we were using a platform-provided tag, anything that begins with Apex or Aura for Lightning components, this encoding is built in. Doesn't mean you should forget about it and not check, but it's built in, and Salesforce protects you that way. So we head on back to the slide. And this is just the definition of SQL injection. And then I also have, if the mouse worked, maybe.
Do you want to display?
Here we go. This is just an example of the strength of the Sokolow injection. So when these slides are available, you can go and download, take pictures if you have to. It's all right. It's all good. Here's the fix. So here we're using that variable binding with this query name and the colon. And then some quick definitions of cross-site scripting and then CSRF, which is another flavor of cross-site scripting, which was the example that we showed you. But the main difference is that with CSRF, the user is already authenticated. And then now they can execute code as an authenticated user. So then if they are really savvy, they can insert, update, delete users, depending upon what authentication and privileges that the user that they are impersonating has.
Do you want to display the image tag getting sent to the scroll so it doesn't redirect to the?
Oh, yes. Sure. You want to see if I actually fixed it? Let's see. Let's stop presenting. Sorry about that. So let's see if it actually got fixed with that JS encoding. So that same image tag, we're going to create the scroll, and there we go. It was interpreted as text. We didn't get redirected out to the bad site, and scroll's a little bit overflowing. I'm not a CSS guy. I was a database programmer. We didn't care how nice things looked, but it worked. You got the point. So we did put together a trail mix for you guys. We only had 20 minutes. Our trail mix is 12 hours worth of information because this is a very large topic. It's a very serious topic, and there's just a wealth of information out there at your fingertips that you can go and use and get better at security concerns. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to get kicked off the stage, but we'll be available for questions right down here.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.